Hello, and welcome to Sue's Baked Goods. Today we're going to be making the maple syrup order. Every week this coming month I'm going to be making a whole bunch of different things. This week specifically we're going to be making meat pie, lemon circles, apple cages, banana bread, and some rye bread. So we're going to slowly go through it, and I'm going to post about once a week of the orders that are going to be coming to the maple syrup bush. Make it a little mini series. So let's get into it. Now, for the maple syrup bush, I have gotten a huge order that is going to be made throughout the month. So I do know that I have a total of 6 pies that have tops, which means I need to make 8 pie dough recipes. And because the pie dough, this specific recipe works better the colder it is, I can make all of it now and freeze what I need, what I need for later on, and just keep what I need for today. So first we're gonna do that by putting all the flour, salt, and butter together. Since I'm making a huge batch, I am going to be using the machines. If you're doing this at home, it's easy to do if you're just doing one pie recipe. So we'll first put in the flour. Now that the flour's mixed in, I aerated it with the whisk. Then we're gonna add in our salt and butter. Add in our salt. There we are. That's all we need. Make sure we mix that all up nicely so it's spread out throughout. We don't want some salt being in 4 pies, we want it being in all 8. This both aerates it and mixes it. So now for the butter, make sure you have it in nice little chunks so that it blends nicely in. We want to make this mealy in consistency once we add it to the mixer. Now to make sure the liquid's ready before we start mixing, I always like to use eggs and water. Eggs give you that nice color and flavor, and water just gets you the liquid you need. You don't need, if you just used eggs, it'd be too rich and it'd take away from your filling. So I prefer to go this way. This is the perfect time to tell you, I need 8 large eggs for this recipe, or 60 grams of egg per recipe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's actually 9 eggs in here. That's what gets me the weight, so I'm gonna go with the weight. That's why when it's a small recipe, you can use 1 egg and then just add more water. But when you get into the bigger and bigger recipes, you have to make sure you go by weight. Because if I didn't have that extra egg in, I'd be 60 grams less than what I actually need. So now that I've done that, let's get the rest of the water in. Now we'll just mix that up. We're gonna start our mixer on 1 and just turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off. We don't want it to spray everywhere, so I'm just going slowly until it's nice and going. Okay, now that it's not gonna spray everywhere, I'll just let it go until it becomes nice and mealy. Once it becomes nice and mealy, I'll add in our liquid, and that will start to form our dough. Right before it fully forms the dough with the paddle, I'm going to finish it with my hands to make sure that this does not overwork it. We can't have anything overworked in this dough or it becomes chewy and gross. When you're using a mixer, you have to be very, very careful. With bread, if you needed an extra minute on the mixer, nothing's gonna be bad. Maybe up to, like, if you go 4 minutes past what you're supposed to do, you might overwork it. With the pie dough, it could be 30 seconds, 20 seconds, because depending on how high powered your mixer is, it could ruin it immediately. So we're gonna go very slow. Once it's semi-mixed, we're gonna continue. It's nice and mealy now. Just a little bit of spray. Now be very careful, obviously. I don't want to put my hands anywhere near it. But if you look in there, you can see nice chunks like this. Tiny chunks. That's kind of what we're looking for. A few bigger chunks That way it like laminates, semi-laminates the dough, giving you that flaky texture. So this is a perfect stage to start adding in our liquid. So we're gonna turn this on and slowly add in our liquid. We're gonna turn it off to make sure I can get all this in without being dangerous. We'll get to the almost stage and then I'll finish it with hands. That was literally 10 seconds after finishing pouring all the liquid in. It is very quick, and you want to get to about this stage where it's basically all together, but not really all together. So once you're at this stage, you're going to take it all out, and we're going to portion it into 6 different pieces. But before we do that, there is a few loose bits that I want to semi-mix together. Before I do that, put some flour down, mix all our dough together. Make sure everything's out, and make sure you have space. So you see how there's very little of this mainly flour stuff left? That's kind of what you want to get to if you want to be safe. I could have probably left it on for another 5 seconds, and it would have been perfectly fine. But this way I know for sure that it's safe and not going to mess up, and I can just finish it with my hands. So we'll come back when I'm done that. So I've now semi-mixed it to a decent amount, and each piece should be about 720 grams each. So we're gonna just start portioning it. As we portion, it'll get easier to work with and we can get rid of a lot of this smaller stuff. So let's just get started. Grab some of the big stuff, get about 600-ish grams. Then we'll add in some of the small stuff so that we mix in the small stuff with the big stuff. 717, that's our first one. And now that it's one, even though it had a bunch of those little ones, it's easy to form into this nice little ball. So we're going to continue on until we get all 6 different pieces. Now that we got our nice 6 pieces, we're going to just nicely knead them just to make sure that all those little bits that were loose at the beginning are all fully stuck in there. We don't want to overwork this, so we're just going to do that. Just make it nicely like that. Make sure all of that's in. Then we're going to flatten it and we're going to wrap it afterwards. And let it rest in the fridge, and the rest, since I'm only making 1 pie today, the rest will be in the freezer. So, nice. 1 done. Make sure all those little bits that fall off come back in. That's number 2 done. Make sure you use cold water, cold eggs, everything cold. You want to make sure that you don't melt the butter or you won't have it nice and flaky. And we got to work fast because of that. You'll notice I only put a little bit of flour down at the very beginning to make sure nothing sticks. But you don't want to be putting any extra flour into this, because the more flour you put in, the denser it's going to get. And the more it's going to be like a rock rather than a flaky dough. So, let's start wrapping them. When wrapping them, make sure you do it very nicely. You don't want any freezer burn. And you want them to be flat, like that. That way they freeze faster. Or if you're doing them today, they cool down a lot faster. Meaning, instead of having to wait, let's say like 45 minutes because it was a big ball, you only have to wait half an hour. If it like is a big ball, you probably actually have to wait like a full hour. So that's all we're gonna have to do. Wrap them nicely like that. Whoa. Make sure when you're working with anything that isn't food that you don't let it touch other things, because even if you know exactly where this has been, like I know this has been in a clean spot, there shouldn't be any dirt on the outside, you can't be 100% sure. It's just a good habit to be in where you don't put this on top of anything. Like I don't want to be putting it on top of here. You'll notice that this is all that stuck to the table and is all waste. Now, remember, the less waste the better. The more this is in your sink, the more you have to fix it. Like, this isn't a lot for 8 loaves, but throughout a whole year, you might do 8,000, sorry, not loaves, pies. You might do 8,000 pies. If you do 8,000 pies, times this by 1,000, that just went through your drain. So if you do have stuff like this, it's way better to scrape it off and throw it into the garbage than rather leave it into your bowls where you have to wash it. Always remember, these little things can cost you huge. Because yes, if this isn't in split between 8 loaves, the customer might not notice. But the bigger this gets, the more the customer will notice, and the more you will notice, because customers will stop coming, and all of a sudden your dishes, or sorry, not your dishes, you're using double the amount of soap. You have to get more Drano because your drains are all messed up, and you might even have to call in plumbers because a pipe breaks because of this. You want absolutely the least amount possible going into your drains. But since that's a nice small amount, it's okay, as long as you throw it in the garbage. So with this rest of these doughs, we're going to put 5 of them into the freezer. And we're going to keep 1 for today. So now we're going to start into our meat pie. We're only going to be making 1 this week. To start that, we're going to season our pan with our onions and garlic, sweat them out, then add all our other vegetables. Cook that for a slight little bit. Then we're going to add in our milk, let that simmer. Then we're going to cook our meat on the side. Make sure you drain all the oil and fat from the meat into the garbage. You don't want that going down your sink. Then we'll mix all that together once they're all done cooking. Let it cool down and then put that into our pie as a filling. So to start, we're going to put in our spices for our meat pie. Just a pinch. This is all to taste. This is what I like it to taste like. If you like more cinnamon, more cloves, more whatever, you figure that out for yourself. And of course, we're gonna have a bay leaf. Make sure you find this. This is like wood. If you eat this, it's not pleasant whatsoever. And of course, cinnamon. The cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves gives you a very nice earthy texture, or not texture, taste, which is perfect to complement the rest of the pie. So with all these spices in, we're going to add our onions and garlic to this after we chop them up. So all depending on how you like your meat pie, do you like bigger chunks or smaller chunks, will determine how big you want it. I like about this big, about medium dice. So depending on how you like your meat pie will determine how thick you want them. Make sure you cut them nicely. So you want to have even shapes and about the same size. So if they're all about this size, that's good. They all seem to be very close, if not the same. We're going to add this into our bowl. We're going to cook our spices without anything, just to make sure that they're very strong and you get that flavor coming through. Then we're going to add in our oil, heat that up, and then add our onions and garlic. We'll sweat that. While that's sweating, we're going to chop our celery, potato, and carrot, and then add that in once that's done sweating. So let's continue. Now, you don't need a lot of onion, so if you're worried about using too much, it's okay to just cut this in half. Leave this in the fridge for later. Cut off all the inedible parts. Have a nice bowl for all your compost. It makes it a lot easier so that your station doesn't get cluttered. And remember, peel off as much as you need. Don't go, oh, I only peel off the top layer or 2 top layers. Make sure you peel until it's edible. There's nothing worse than eating onion skins. It's really gross. So, if you're worried about how big you need to make it, put it into your bowl. This is way too much with all the other stuff. But it weighs about 120 and I need about 50 more. So I need a little bit more than half. So half, move over a bit, boom, test it, perfect. So I just need to add this much more. I can now put the rest of this in a bag. Because this is fully, I don't want to put it back with the skins because the skins might make this go bad faster. So this one's okay because it still has the skin on the outside and then the skins will just touch. But this one, I'm going to put in a bag and put it in the fridge. When working with any vegetable or fruit or anything for that matter, whenever you're weighing, you have to make sure you're weighing the amount that you're going to be putting in there. So you're not going to be using the skin. So make sure you take off the skin before you even weigh it to see if it's good enough. Because if you start putting the skin in, oh, I'm at my 5 grams, but because I have the skin on, it's now 3 grams. And then you lose all that flavor that you really want. Same with your carrots. When you peel it, you gotta make sure you peel it first. Same with your banana. You always want to weigh what you're going to use, which is a bit harder to do with costing. But what you do for costing is you figure out how much you get per pound with the peels. So, for example, or kilogram, whatever unit you like to use. So say we get a kilogram of bananas and the skins are on average 300 grams. So you go, okay, so the cost for that 1 kilogram of bananas gets me 700 grams. So that same cost for that kilogram is for 700 grams of bananas. That way you get it even costing and then you don't realize later on, like, wait, why are we losing money? You make sure that everything is nicely costed and you can make a nice profit. So we're just gonna do these garlics. With garlic, the best way to mince it and make it quick and easy is you crack it, just like that, then you start cutting. When you crack it like that, you start to get that taste out, which is nice, and you make it nice and flat so that you get a nicer dice. And then you just go back and forth. Make sure your hands are always like this so that they never go near the blade, and it allows you to just go back and forth. You can look away wherever you want and you'll never cut yourself. And you can just keep going forever, essentially, like this. Just every once in a while, scrape it off and continue back again. That way any big chunks that stick to your knife won't stay big chunks forever. Now when we're working with this, we're going to turn this on light so that we semi-roast our spices. That will bring out all their flavor. Then we're going to add some oil and then our vegetables. Not the celery, carrots, and potatoes. We're going to slowly start putting that in a bowl of itself, and we'll add that after the onions and garlic. I'm starting to get that nice cinnamon, earthy smell. That's what you're looking for. Once that happens, you add on your oil, turn it up a bit. Once it's heated up, we'll add in our stuff. So I'll heat it up now. Add in our onions and garlic. Don't worry if you don't get it all in right now because you're going to put more vegetables in here and pour it in again. And you just slowly mix it around. And let them start sweating. Your potatoes are just like apples, where if you start peeling them, they're going to start turning brown. So do your celery and carrots first. Cut them into nice chunks. Bottom part, you're going to want to cut it a bit smaller so that they're about nice even chunks. But start with these two because while those onions and garlic are sweating, these potatoes will turn brown. just in that little amount of time. So if you cut all these first, those will start sweating and basically be done. Then you can start peeling these, cut them up. Those will be done by then. Then you can pour everything in all at once. So just cut nice big chunks and we'll be good. The vegetables take the longest. Your meat doesn't take so long. So make sure you start your vegetables first before you move on. So these are nice small chunks over here on this end. Oh. Remember, have everything clean so that if something rolls off, you don't have to throw it out. But near this end, it's a bit thicker, so I'm going to cut it in half and then cut it. But always big chunks so that you get an actual taste of each vegetable. It's okay to, if you like it the other way, but it's a lot more mushy, a lot more like a puree than having an actual meat pie, in my opinion. So, we got both these done. Onions are nicely sweating. If you can't handle doing multiple tasks at once, like letting it sweat while cutting and stuff, let it sweat the onions and garlic first, stop, take it off heat, cut all your vegetables, put it back on heat, pour them in. There's no rush on this unless you're in a bakery sense. Then you need to be at least quick. But if you are a baker, that should always be there. While you're waiting for this to sweat, if they're not even close to being done sweating, just start cleaning up before you start peeling. Make sure you have your milk ready, your salt and pepper ready for seasoning. And if it's still not done after that, you can start working on your meat. So this is starting to sizzle up. You can hear that now. And it's just starting to sweat. You don't want this to brown, you just want it to sweat. So right when it's just almost done sweating, we're gonna add in our vegetables, our potatoes, our carrots, our celery. All the way in there. Now you wanna make sure everything is in here, for sure. Okay, now once we added those in, we're going to measure out our milk. This is a meat pie, so for those vegetarians out there, when I make a vegetarian meat pie, which sounds silly because there's no meat in it, but I use not chicken stock but veggie stock instead of milk, because that way it keeps it vegan and vegetarian. So if both people want it, both people can have it. Careful when pouring, you don't want to pour too much in. The milk for the meat pie, because it's no longer going to be vegan or anything like that, gives it a nice creamy texture and it's really nice versus chicken stock or beef stock. Once these have just cooked for like 2 seconds, we'll add in our milk. Let me get you a bit of light. There we go. Add in our milk. Scrape all that in there. We're going to let this get to a boil and let it simmer. Once it gets close to being done, we'll start adding in our salt and our pepper. We don't want to add it in now because it will slowly condense, and if we put, say, 5 grams of salt in now, when the liquid's gone, it could be way more salty than we want. So we're going to put it in after a bit. Now for the meat. I use a mixture of beef and turkey. This gives it a nice mild taste and allows the vegetables to come through, the meat to come through, the milk, all the spices, everything can come and talk in this dish, allowing a lot more nicer flavor. If you just use beef and pork or just beef, then it's only tasting meat, which some people would say is a good thing, but when you have things counteract each other, it's not a downside, it's more of an upside. So I always do half and half. So half a pound of beef and then half a pound of turkey. Now the nice thing is I buy them in 1-pack containers, so I can just mix this with this for the next pie. I'm gonna mix this together because I am going to be making that other meat pie fairly soon. So I can just put this into a bag, mix together into the fridge, and it'll be still fresh a few days from now. Okay, so once you have them in a bowl, you can start mixing them. Mix them nicely so that half of your pie isn't turkey and half your other pie is beef. You want it to be throughout the whole thing. And it's good that both looks slightly different because now I can see this is beef, this is turkey, and I know I am not mixed fully. Once it gets to look very similar on everywhere, then I know I'm done. So just like that, boom. Everything looks very similar, and I can work on this one. Because this is for later on, I'm gonna just put it into my little plastic bag, and then, I don't want this. There we go, just take that out of the way. Yeah. So once I leave this in the fridge, I'll be able to use it a few days from now. Now, if you got these containers to work with, like if you're putting everything in here anyways, and this is nice and clean, because it has to be from the grocery store or from your supplier or wherever you're getting your stuff from, just use it. Why mess up another dish if you don't have to, right? So, just use this, mix it all together. Now it's a bit harder in this, which makes sense because it's a bit smaller, but it's way better than dirtying another dish. Especially if you're only doing this at home. You don't need to have a giant sink at the end. If you're at a bakery, you have a dishwasher normally, and it makes it a lot easier, but if you're at home, you might be the dishwasher, and you don't want to be messing that up. So, that's nicely mixed. Let's open this up. This is my meat hand, so keep one hand clean, one hand dirty. You don't want the outside to have meat on it, or all of a sudden you'll contaminate everything else. Nicely in there. And remember, because you're using meat and stuff, you need to make sure your station's fully cleaned again. So I'm going to put this in the fridge and then we'll move on to cooking the meat. So, as our vegetables cook on the side, we'll start on our meat. Let's make sure it's nice and hot. Use a piece of paper towel to be your little spoon rest, if you don't have one. Always add your little bit of oil so that things don't stick. So once this heated up, we'll put in this. We'll start seasoning right away and taste as we go. If you think it's too salty, you messed up. You gotta get this right. It goes a little bit at a time, little bit at a time. If you add way too much salt, the only thing to fix it would be to put more meat and make a bigger batch. Which is fine if you're gonna freeze a bunch of pies, but you don't really want to be freezing pies. You want to be having the freshest of food, so make sure you're going slow. So, to tell if your pan is hot, you move the oil around. Once the oil is nice and runny and moves very quickly, that's when you know that it's hot. And you do want to get a nice brown color onto this. That'll get you that nice flavor, and it will make sure that everything's dead, so no one gets sick. With that nice brown color, you're gonna get a beautiful flavor. If it's just gray from cooked meat, it's gonna be very dull and very boring when you eat it. So try to get some brown in there. You won't be able to get everything super brown, but you'll be able to get some of it brown, which will get you that amazing flavor. So, if you look at the oil, it's moving around real fast. So, we can start putting in our meat. And you hear that sound? That's what you want to hear when you put it in. Okay, so if you have fresh pepper, like cracked pepper, use it. If you don't, it's okay to just use this, but cracked is far better than pre-ground pepper. So we're just going to break it up slightly. We don't want to break it up too much because the more we flip it, the more it's going to turn gray and not brown. So we're just going to break it up a little bit so that it makes it easier for when we do start flipping it. Always be checking on your vegetables. and making sure that it's not boiling over anything. Once this starts to brown on one side, we'll flip it, let it brown on that side, then we'll grind it up with our spatula to make it nice and fine. That way everything we know is fully cooked so no one gets sick, and we still got that brown color for the taste. So we'll come back when that happens. You can start to smell the cooked flavor. That's what you're looking for, that nice brown right there. So we're going to start flipping everything. Now that everything's done cooking, we chopped it up nicely like that. I use very lean beef, and turkey's always super lean, so there's not a lot of fat in here. And because there's not a lot, I'm just going to add the whole thing. If you have a more fatty meat, you're going to want to take some of that fat out, because if you put all that fat in there, it's going to be very greasy and oily and gross. Before you pour this in here, make sure you take out this, because if you pour this in here and you don't, you're going to forget this or lose this. And again, this tastes like wood and isn't that much fun to deal with. So we're going to just pour this in. You want to cook this all to just before what you want. So I want the meat to be fully cooked, and I want the vegetables to be soft but not hard and not mushy. So I'm gonna have them slightly harder than I want, because remember, this is gonna have to bake inside your pie, and when it bakes you're gonna lose a lot more moisture, so you want this to be a bit more runny, and it's going to get a lot softer. So determine what you want. Do you want it mushy? Do you want it soft? Do you want it hard? Everyone's different. To find out what you want. Now for the seasoning, you're just going to have to play that by ear. Do it yourself, because there's so many different factors. How fresh are your vegetables? If they're super fresh, you won't need as much. How fresh is your milk? How fresh is your beef, turkey, etc.? How much fat is in your beef and your turkey? If it's a lot of fat, you're going to need a bit more salt, but not so much pepper, because you need the salt to counteract the fat. So we're just going to let this cool, roll out our dough to make our pie shell, and we'll start baking. So remember, this dough is for the top and the bottom, so make sure you cut a piece out. And leave this off to the side, you won't need it right away. And we can even put this back in the fridge. But let's start with our bottom. Before it forms a crack and gets bigger and bigger, fix it. Use a little bit of flour, not too much, just a little bit. Just so that things don't stick too much. See how the crack's getting bigger? Make sure you fix it as you go. Now I've rolled it out. To make sure you check, because there's a nice little piece here, make sure you have that on either side. Plus remember that because this is a tin one and not a glass one or something with a bigger lip, you're gonna have to have a nice round bit, like about maybe centimeter and a bit past the point, so that you can make a nice crimp. So slowly wrap it onto your rolling pin, just like so. Put your thing there, lift up, go slow, and just go, done. It's a bit harder with the tin because it moves around so much. If you have a heavier glass or metal, it's a lot easier, but this is for takeout, so I have to use a tin. Then we're going to slowly push this in so that it's nice and tight against the wall. Now make sure, if you're going to use scissors, to clean them before using them. I already have, obviously. Or your knife. Scissors work a lot better. If you have designated scissors for this, that's even better. But if you're using this for other things, always make sure it's washed Even if it's a designated one, you should still be washing it just in case someone used it for some other reason. And you're just gonna see the metal's right here for the tin, and I want to go a bit past it. So I'm gonna cut all the way around. Be very gentle with this stuff because we still need to use this for the top. If you work this too much, you won't be able to use it, period, and you'll just have to throw it out, and that's a huge waste. So just keep it nicely. It's okay to crumple it like this as long as you're not pressing it into each other. So I'm gonna go grab the other dough, grab our filling, fill this up, and we'll cover it. Now that this is cooled down, we've had plenty of time to let it cool down. We're gonna just pour this in. Make sure you mix this nicely so that there's vegetables everywhere and meat everywhere. You don't wanna give an inferior product. Make sure you scrape all liquid, all spices, everything in here. Then we're gonna just pat it down nicely. If you're doing a bunch of pies, you're gonna want to put this on the scale or put this on a scale and take out the right amount. So, we have that done. We'll move this over our way. We're going to roll out this dough and this dough together to get our top. So, let's form this into a dough, or a circle, sorry. A little bit of flour. Start rolling. Once it gets to this stage, this is when I like to add this stuff. Because this stuff has already been worked with, I prefer to kind of lie it on top and try and form it into a nice dough without working it too much. This stuff, like this side's gonna look ugly, but you can always put this on the bottom and then it won't be as bad. That'll also make it more layers, right? As long as it's gonna stick together and work, we're all good. Just make sure you're still using flour. And you're gonna wanna roll this out until it's this long, so that it fits here and here in a perfect circle. There we go. Now we're gonna just lift this up. Be very careful with this. And nicely put it down. And because you have this bit, you have a nice line to cut with. So as you go through, you just lift up this bit together and go, okay, follow this line. Might be little bits here and there that don't overlap nicely, but you'll fix that during the crimping. Now sadly, you've worked with this dough too much and you're probably gonna have to throw this out. If you are very careful and you don't work too much with this, just like how I did, I could actually probably use this for another top. If you're having a bad day and you're going like you're working it like this, it's gonna be too bad and you will have to throw this out. So I am gonna be throwing this bit out, sadly. So now that you have your two things, just clamp them together. First and foremost, go around once or twice, depending on how you want it. And you're at this stage where you can do whatever you like to crimp. You can do the simple crimp. You can use other dough to like do a braid or something around it. But what I like to do, because it's simple, looks good, and I know all employees can do this, push your thumb and your thumb and your pointer finger together. This also helps with make sure that there's a nice seal between the dough so that nothing leaks out as it bakes, just in case you didn't press them too well together. We're just going to keep going like this all the way around. So make sure you cut your design in the middle to release some of that air. I like to do 4 long in a star shape, and then 4 smaller cuts in between. Just like that. Nice little design in the middle. Now, sadly, I don't have the time to do all the baked goods at once in one day to make it as fresh as possible. So I am going to put this in the fridge for one day and bake it tomorrow. I'm not going to bake it today because once you bake it, it's going to get more and more stale. Where this way, it'll be as fresh as possible. If you can do 100 pies a day, but you need 120 on a certain day, you're sadly going to have to make some the day before. And it's okay to do that as long as it's like this. You wrap it nicely, you put it in the fridge, and you leave it. Don't put it in the freezer, that'll make it worse. But if it's only for a day, it's not gonna be that bad. Maybe 2 days, up to 3 days, it'll be still okay. Anything past that, and don't be doing that. You wanna keep this as fresh as possible, keep your customers coming. So we're gonna nicely wrap it. We're gonna put it into our box. This way, it's not going to get contaminated with anything else. And when we bake it, everything will be fine. I really don't like doing this too often, but you have to understand that you have to make sacrifices in certain areas to keep everything super fresh and super tasty. This is wrapped, it's in a box, nothing's gonna touch it. It's only one day. All the vegetables and meat were fresh, so this will easily last 3 days in the fridge and still come out basically the same as if I did it all on one day. So with that tiny bit of taste and looks gone from waiting a day, won't make a difference in this case. But you go 4, 5, 6, 7 days, it's gonna taste way worse. It's gonna look bland. Be careful when you do this. Only do this if you have to, no other reason. Now we're gonna move on to the lemon circles. Just like that pie, it's okay for these to sit in the fridge for a day because these need to be cool anyways to be good. So if you're gonna plan out your days or your week to determining on like how much of what you need, things like bread go stale fast, so you want to make sure they're done on that day that they're sold. Pies can last a bit longer. These specific cheesecakes need at least a day-ish to cool down, or a few hours at least, so they can be fine. But puff pastry likes to be warm. Cakes can be in the fridge. Just figure out what you need to do and what can last for how long where. So this week I'm making bread, the pies, the lemon circles, and the apple cages. The bread and the apple cages need to be done the freshest, so I'm going to do them tomorrow, right when I'm about to deliver, and the day before I'm going to do the pie and the lemon circles. Normally I'd be able to all do this in one day, it's not a lot of things, but I do have plans tomorrow, sadly, that will stop me from doing everything at once. But you have to work with what you got. So we're going to start with our lemon circles. Graham crackers. Mix that nicely. Then we're going to melt our butter. I'm just going to use the microwave because it's quicker. Always make sure you're zeroed out so you get the right number. Perfect. So we're going to microwave that and come back when that's all done. So we're going to mix these together. Make sure you get all of it in there. We're going to just mix it up till it's, well, just until everything comes together perfectly, so everything's moist. There's no dry bits here and there. Everything's nicely mixed. There's no sugar in one spot. So just like that. Then we're going to scoop into our tin, pre-bake that. Then we're going to make our cheesecake, bake that again, then we're going to pipe. Try and make sure you put the exact amount in each one. So start with that. Make sure that you're scooping the same amount. And if you have leftovers, start putting tiny bits into each one. We have a little bit extra, so just put in the ones that you feel like you put not enough in. So these early ones I feel like I didn't put enough in. Then we're going to pat these down. Make sure they're nice and flat so they bake nicely. So we're just going to cook these for a quick 10 minutes. Make sure you have convection on. So let's start with cream cheese. You want soft cream cheese, obviously. We're gonna mix this with our sugar. That will make it nice and soft and the perfect texture that we want. We're gonna start mixing. Just get that nice little, small little mix in right away. We're just trying to make it nice and smooth so that when we add in everything else, it's a nice consistent product. So we're just trying to get it nice and smooth again. So we're gonna keep this mixer here, zero it off, start adding our rest of our ingredients. So sugar first. Sugar helps it smooth it out, get rid of those lumps. And we'll slowly mix as we go. So, very simple, we just mix every ingredient one at a time. And we try and make it as smooth and as consistent as possible as we go through. After putting the sugar in with the cream cheese, you can go in any order you want, except for the flour needs to be last. That way, you're not working the gluten too much. Even though it's not a lot of flour, you don't want to mess that up just for any product at all. And this way, you keep yourself consistent for when you work on other products that have a lot more flour in it. So, salt, we'll add in. And you can actually do a bunch at a few times. So, salt, vanilla, cream. We'll mix those together. So you just mix it nicely. I'll move this out of the way. So you're just slowly going at it. You don't want to go too fast like that. Just go slow. So we added in our egg. Remember, if it's one recipe, you don't have to worry about that 2 grams, that 1 gram. But the larger it gets, be a lot more careful. If you're using, like if you're making 10, that's 20 grams gone from your recipe. If you're doing 30, that's a full egg gone from your recipe. So make sure you keep a lookout at that, so you don't mess up your recipe. So once that's all mixed in, I pre-weighed out my lemon juice. So we'll just add the lemon juice. Always use fresh lemons. Don't use the squirt bottles lemon juice. It doesn't make it as nice of a product, and fresh lemons are just so much more vibrant for taste. Okay. Oops. Now the only thing left is flour, but we're about to take out our bottoms for this. So we'll move everything out of the way and get those out. Okay, so added in the flour, taking out the bottoms. We're just gonna mix this up, then pour them in, and we're good to go to put them back in. Now, I did forget to buy spray, but what you can do if you don't have spray, grab a little bit of oil. Be very careful not to do a lot, and allow your pan to cool down. You don't want this to be hot, or you're obviously going to burn yourself. So just a little bit of oil, rub it against the sides. This will keep your cheesecake from sticking. It's the same as if you did spray. Spray is just a lot easier. Now that we sprayed them or used our oil, we're just gonna pour in our mixture. Depending on how fast you mix this will determine how liquidy it is. If you beat a lot of air into it, it's going to be super thick, which is going to cause air bubbles, and your final product's going to be a lot more airy than you want for a cheesecake. If you don't mix it too much, it's going to look very liquidy, and that's what you're looking for. Now I have adjusted the recipe to make sure that I have enough cheesecake, because the last few times I've been making this, I was having to scrape the bottom of the barrel to make sure that I was getting exactly enough. This way I know for sure I have enough and very little waste. There's still going to be a slight bit of waste, but when I'm making a batch of hundreds, this will keep the first cheesecake the same size as the last cheesecake, because this one's a bit small, this one's a bit big, but as you can see I still have a lot left down here that I can keep pouring in. And I'm just gonna go grab myself a spatula, and I can use this spatula to get this last little bit into the ones that don't have a full thing. So that one's better. That way most of it's out and these look perfect. So let's put them back in. About 25 minutes. And we'll come back then. 25 minutes is up now. Take a look at them. These are nice and cooked. Let these cool. I just put this pan under here just in case it leaked. It shouldn't ever leak with these, but I just wanted to be safe and make sure that none of this leaks out the holes, because the bottom it has a little hole. So just for safety's sake. So once these cool down, we'll pop them out, and then we'll start piping on our lemon curd, and we'll be done for today. Tomorrow we'll be baking that pie, we'll be making 2 rye bread, and we'll be finishing up some apple cages. Actually, the last thing I have to do today, after I pipe these, actually I can do it right now, is get rye sponge started. Very simple sponge. All we're going to do is put water, flour together, and a tiny bit of yeast, instant yeast, to get this sponge going. We'll let it sit for a day. That will allow the flavors to develop, and then we can bake with it tomorrow. So we're going to put in our flour first. Since I'm making rye bread, we're going to be using rye flour. It's a bit tight. And just a sprinkle of instant yeast. And then some water. Once we have this all mixed together, we'll wrap this, and it's gonna look very dry right now, but as the yeast starts to eat the flour and starts to become a sponge, it'll be a lot more liquidy tomorrow. It's all mixed together. Make sure all of it's off your fingers. You need every last drop of it for each bread. And we'll just cover this up. I'm just gonna wrap this up. We're gonna leave it on the counter. We don't need to put this in the fridge. We want this to work and have all day to ferment and get that beautiful flavor. So we're just gonna leave this on the side. Now, we can get these out. Let's move all this stuff. Move this away. With these nice little pans, what you're looking for to know that they're cool enough to take out is when they're cooking, they like to bubble up and make kind of like a muffin shape, and then they slowly flatten out. So as soon as they start to flatten out, you lift it up a bit, press one way, press the other way, and just press in a circle, and it will slowly, it's a bit hot still actually, so I am going to let it sit for a bit, maybe 5 more minutes, because it is a little hard to get out. But 5 more minutes and we'll come back. So for sure these are definitely cooled down. Like I said, just work your way around, circle, and you can pull the whole thing out. You can leave the bottom on just for now, but yeah, you just push on one side, push on the other side, just do circle shape until it pops out, just like so. Look at that, beautiful. When you pipe, hands, you only press with this, and this is to guide you. 2 fingers, you don't want to be holding it because you don't want this to get hot. Hopefully you can see this properly. Start in the middle, start making a circle, keep going out, going back into the middle, and then as you're finishing, you stop squeezing and you do this. That way it continues the circle without making like a giant tower in the middle. What I mean by tower is I mean like a tiny little thing just sticking straight up. We don't want that. We want a perfect circle. These are how the lemon circles turned out. Sorry for the camera work. That last little bit there, you couldn't see some of it, but I'll try my best to change that in the future. They turned out way better than any of the other ones I've ever made, so that's good. Here's a sneak preview for the upcoming video that will come out tomorrow. You can't see much, that's why it's a little preview. And if you've liked this video, please like and subscribe. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. I even have my own website. Thank you, and have a nice day.